beverage enthusiast. Welcome to another exciting episode of the FoodTech Innovators Podcast, where we explore the transformative impact and success stories in the food and beverage industry. Today, we have a really exciting guest, Laurent from Innodal. Okay, thank you so much. And I understand you guys have a kind of anti-pathogen solution, which is kind of interesting for us because about 5 years ago, we did a joint venture with the University of British Columbia to try to find a way to use lasers to identify pathogens on food contact surfaces. But it sounds like you're actually a step ahead of us because you're eliminating the problem from the start, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. We're trying to, not detect anything at all. So, not trying to, not use laser, but at some point, yes.
Okay. Why don't you give us a little bit of an indication as to kind of what it is that you do and why it's so innovative?
Certainly. So, I'm Laurent Dallaire. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Innodal. Innodal, we're in the space, like you said, of developing natural antimicrobial for the food processing industry. So, being able to provide natural alternative to, let's say, traditional preservative like salt, sulfite, nitrates, harsh chemicals that are, let's say, frequently used in the food processing industry to, try to get rid of all those pathogenic strains like Listeria, E. coli, Salmonella that are still a big issue and still being like the number one enemy in that food processing industry, where you're always trying to provide the best quality of food with all the natural aspect of it, but being in a fine balance of I want to bring 100% safety and clean label, but more than often it's hard to do both.
All right. So actually, I thought that your solution was just for Listeria. So it's actually beyond that. You can do other sorts of pathogens as well.
So of course, our solution that we just got our technology INEO, so the little vials that we often see on our product. So that's the 10 pre-dose concentrate of the protein. So that's against Listeria specifically. But of course, our goal is not to stop at that. We have a solution against E. coli coming up in 2025, another one for Salmonella in 2026. So our goal is really to be able to bring that whole portfolio of solution because, there's tons of different pathogen, and not only pathogen, but also all the alteration strain that could reduce the shelf life of your product. So being able to provide this wide range of solution for the food processing industry.
Okay, that's fascinating. Just for our listeners who might not understand the severity of it, Listeria, for example, is quite a toxic organism, and just I believe 8 particles can actually result in people's deaths. And it's actually so virulent that a 2-liter bottle would be enough to kill everybody in North America if you distributed it equally. And we were actually, food safety is a big part of what we do in our software system. And we were actually hired by the lawyers of a food supermarket chain who shall remain unnamed at this point. He brought us in after, unfortunately, they had a listeriosis outbreak that was caused by sanitation issues at their facility, and they killed 1 person and put 4 more in critical condition. So this is really no laughing matter in terms of the severity of the problem. So, and I know that a lot of other things, like I've worked with companies, for example, that make sausages using organic methods and fermented pork sausages, for example, which is just really a perfect environment for really nasty bacteria to grow. So the way that they control it is they use nitrates, and for the organic people, they'll sometimes use derivatives of celery because it has a high nitrate concentrate. Is your solution sort of based on that sort of technology, or is it something completely new and different and wonderful?
Of course, wonderful. No, it's absolutely and totally different. So the basis of our technology is called bacteriocins. So bacteriocins are small protein produced by probiotic strain as a mean of defense in their environment. So we extract those protein and then we'll apply those specific protein in the food product or on the food product to have this very targeted effect against, in this case, Listeria. And what's very intriguing and impressive about these peptides is the fact that these peptides, they work by recognizing a specific receptor on the surface of Listeria. So the protein will target the receptor, fix itself on it, and then it opens the receptor, and the bacteria dies from emptying itself. So it's really a scalpel effect, and a very targeted one. So we're able to have high effectiveness with low dosage of the protein. At the end, what we're really applying in the food product, we're not at the ppm level, we're at the ppb level. So very low dosage that won't have any side effect in terms of qualities of your product. So you won't have any change in color, texture, taste of the product. It's going to be just a targeted antimicrobial effect.
So when you're talking about sort of low dosage, do you mean that if I'm producing a pound of sausage, I don't need a pound of your peptides? Is it?
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. So, like I said in our packaging, that's a 10 ml pre-dose vial. At its most concentrated, one vial like that will treat up to 1 ton of food products. So 1,000 kg of food products. So it's very efficient and pretty doesn't take much space. So easy to ship, easy to use for them. So no, clearly we're going to be in the small packaging and the dosage of application.
So for 100 kilos, how much of
One,
product do you
one,
need?
one, 1,000
Oh,
kilos.
1,000. How much do you
Yeah.
need of your product?
Well, it's going to be the same vial. At the end, our application rate is going to be at the 150 ppb. So basically, like we can translate that saying that 1 gram of the protein will cover up to 6,000 kg food product. So kilogram
Hmm.
of food product. So it's very like the scale of it is very impressive.
Wow, that's amazing. And if I wanted to protect my product against Listeria and also E. coli, for example, would I need two different applications, or is it one that provides for both?
No, it's going to be two different protein to target two different type of receptor because they're totally different bacteria that need different receptor and so different protein. But at the end, it's going to be the same type of application, same type of, let's say, thinking in terms of where will I apply it in my food processing, where we're going to get the most protection basically. So, but at the end, it's going to be a different recipe based on what's the type of pathogen that I want to get rid of.
Okay. Where are you talking to me from right now?
So we're based in Quebec. More specifically, we have a production site in Montreal, and we have a R&D lab that is based in Quebec City.
Oh, excellent. So it's developed in Canada solution. So you're yet another flagship company in the Canadian food safety industry, which I think is a world leader quite clearly, like us.
Yeah, we're definitely well Canadian and proud of it. It's in the food business, and we're looking about let's say ERP solution and ingredients. It's pretty rare to see stuff come up from Canada. A lot of time it's solution coming from the US, Asia. So to be able to bring innovation from Canada for Canadian and be able to export it as well, I think that's the most exciting part of it.
All right. Have you found the Canadian government helpful in participating in your development, or have they been more of an obstacle?
No, definitely not. There was definitely, let's say, a learning curve. So when we started, young guys coming out of the university with absolutely no experience, knocking on the door of Health Canada saying, hey, we've got a great solution, peptide base there. We want to get it approved. How do we do that? So when we started the company, it was in 2017. We had the basic of the technology. There was two PhD before us who worked on it, and then we were the lucky one, let's say, to be able to extract it from university and try to bring it up to the market. We still had a lot of, let's say, technological maturation to do to the technology to be able to make it available and really being a real tool that's going to be useful. So we had maybe 2 other years to really work on the concept, and then going to Ottawa to meet Health Canada and tell them, first of all, yes, it's safe, but also the big change with this technology is that it's not an ingredient. It's going to be considered as a processing aid. And the main difference with that is that an ingredient and a processing aid, you won't have to label it on your list of ingredients. And that for our customer, that's the game changer. Okay, now you're talking, because in terms of ingredient, there's plenty of antimicrobial ingredients out there with their pros and cons, but being able to provide efficacy and clean label and not to appear on the list of ingredient and having to replace all your labeling, wow, okay, now you're talking, that's something different. So for us, that was the big breakthrough to be able to convince Health Canada, yes, this is a processing aid, it's not an ingredient, because that's what food processor want, that's what the consumer want as well. So definitely helpful in that way. And then we had the Health Canada approval in 2020. And for us, that was the go-to. Okay, so now we're serious. Now we have something to sell. Let's get out there.
So you're already 4 years approved. So you must have customers using it in the market, I would suspect.
Well, hope so as well. Yeah, definitely we're coast to coast. And let's say our first customers were really in the seafood industry, so crab, lobster, salmon, smoked salmon. Of course, being from Quebec, yeah, we first addressed all the smoked salmon industry because for them, Listeria, that's a day-to-day struggle. They know it. They have a product at risk, and we're proud to say that. Well, now in Quebec, yeah, pretty much 95% of all smoked salmon produced uses Ineo. So that was our first market right there. And then we went a lot on the East Coast for all the crab and lobster industry because once again, for them, that's Listeria. It's a day-to-day issue. And what is very interesting is the fact that for this industry, the seafood industry, it's an exportation game. As Canadian, we don't eat seafood. We export all of them in the US, in Europe, in Asia. And when you export seafood, it's tolerance zero for Listeria. If you have one Listeria in your whole batch, well, it's your whole batch who won't go through the border. So for them, what was nice was that Ineo became an exportation tool to be able to make sure that all my production can go through the border and I won't lose any batch for one Listeria would be like you'll be lucky or unlucky to end up finding it, but still end up being a big issue for them.
Right.
So yeah.
Sounds like an interesting journey. So, did you have to do any education? Did you have find that you had misconceptions in the market with respect to your customers or consumers that you had to overcome?
Absolutely. If I think that's what we've done in the last 4 year, education, education, education. As per for any innovation, any breakthrough technologies, you're not bringing something that has a comparative or something that exists, and then you're just fighting over price, like having the best price. No, you're bringing something new, a new tool that didn't exist before. So yes, definitely a lot of education about it, of like what's the possibilities that this innovation brings and how you can use it and how you can leverage it as well. And well, it's funny, like for us being innovators, we come in the food industry, a great playing field, but a little bit still an old school playing field, like using the same methods for the last 40 years. So bringing innovation, it takes a lot of effort to really be able to change the ways that they work and they're very conservative about it because it's a big industry. They don't want to take too much chance. And so you really need to find like the first one who's going to be the first guy who's going to trust you and then be an ambassador for the rest of the industry. So for us, the big challenge in all type of different sector was to find who's going to be the first one who's going to drop the dominoes after, and then you have a success in the whole industry. So definitely yes, education. And of course, when we add the approval 2020, little rough timing in terms of marketing and getting out there with the little COVID there. Hard to travel, hard to do face-to-face meetings and get this relationship going. So we had to overcome that at first. And so myself, being from Montreal, going on the East Coast where there was almost no COVID, and Montreal being red zone in terms of COVID, well, I was not really the most welcome guy traveling up there. So yes, definitely we had to overcome that. But then once it was gone, for us really to meet all these players and be able to get that trust to bring innovation, basically.
I'm curious to know what the secret of your success is with respect to selling your product, because in order to sell that product, the customer has to have a reasonable appreciation of the potential of contamination in their product. And a big part of what we do is food safety. And I've found that a lot of people are like incredibly optimistic and think that that's never going to happen to them. So how do you overcome that kind of objection?
It's still today a challenge, and it's funny you say that because I think one of the things that's very challenging in food safety, it's kind of that wishful thinking of, okay, I won't say the L word. If I'm not saying the Listeria word, it won't happen to me. And for the same time of like, we had the perfect example where we met a ham processing and processor. I had with me VP quality and production manager, told them, what's Listeria for you? And you had the production manager who was telling me, never had that, never an issue, no problem. And then the quality right next to him saying, we had 3 incidents in the last month. So so definitely, like for us, was an eye opener. Okay, we have to first talk to the right person within the company, because it's not something that they talked about, or it's, once again, I feel like, okay, you don't want to jinx it by saying the Listeria word, otherwise it's going to become an issue. So that's on my side, it's the hard part, because you have all this wishful thinking about saying, yes, food safety is very important, but at the same time, okay, I don't want to jinx it, and like we lose kind of the reason behind it, and it becomes more of, well, the shadow behind that we don't want to make it come. So it's still for us a challenge, and still education to do with it. And for most of them, the education also comes, well, just numbers, like what's the cost of a recall, what's the cost of losing a batch through exportation, because you would have one listeria that would cause that you're not able to export. So it's bringing value and dollars to food safety, that food safety matters in terms of your exportation. Food safety matters in terms of your costs, your benefits, and it's not just a side project, food safety. No, it's not priority number one, because if there's no food safety, if you have like an issue with food safety, well, it's your whole business that could go down, basically.
Do you find it easier to sell south into the United States than in Canada? Because I noticed one of the things that we find is that in Canada, if you do have an outbreak of foodborne illness, the regulatory authorities tend to take a kind of a gentle attitude with you and, encourage you not to do it again and, maybe give you sort of modest escalating fines until, they get really
Yeah.
upset. Whereas in the States, they use more like they use enforcement by example. So they'll take an individual that has an outbreak and they'll basically crucify them, give them long prison
Uh,
term, massive fines. So one would think that they're probably a little bit, more aware of the risk down there than they are up here.
it's good. I don't have a lot of experience, because we have Health Canada approval since 2020, and we've just got FDA approval from last month. So we're just in the beginning of being able to sell in the US, but definitely, like, it's two different worlds. And you've said it yourself, when there's an issue with a recall, well, it's the company that is held accountable in Canada. But in the US, it's the individual who is responsible, and you can have criminal charge for non-responsibility and being the source of that incident. And there was one incident a couple of years back in the US with peanut butter, where the owners and the quality assurance responsible were held criminally responsible for the incident. So definitely two different worlds in terms of accountability and responsibility towards food safety.
Yeah, the guy's name I think was Stuart Parnell, and the company was Peanut Corporation of America. If I'm not mistaken, I think he got 29 years in prison,
Oh my,
and the even more interesting thing, in my opinion, because it was gross negligence. He was told by his
yeah,
food
right.
safety people who had tested it, and he shipped the product. I'm not sure if he shipped the product anyway, or failed to recall it after he was notified that it was contaminated. But
Yeah,
his two QA people got 8 years each, even though
nice.
they were encouraging their boss to recall, and he didn't do
Yeah,
it. So they're also suffering. And there was a listeria outbreak too from the Parnell brothers sorry, not Parnell brothers. I had the name a second ago, but it escaped me. Anyway, they were melon brokers from California. They had a
right.
listeriosis outbreak, and a lot of people were sick from that. And I think they were found like it was inadvertent, but they got massive fines, including a lot of
Right.
community service. But I don't think they got jail time for it.
No,
Uh,
but still, like, you can see the big difference, Canada, US, that no, the consequence is totally different between two countries. And one thing that we realize, so we have experience right now in Canada, and we see that yes, there's responsibility, and yes, there's, like, we have the high standard in terms of food safety. One thing that motivates a lot us as Canadian, or let's say the Canadian food processors, is really exportation, because once again, when you're a Canadian that does ready to eat or seafood, when you want to export to the US, it's tolerance zero for listeria. So you're definitely more motivated when you want to export and access that market, compared to the US. When they export to Canada, well, they have a high tolerance for listeria. So let's say that we're not playing by the same rules as well. But we've also started to work with Eastern Europe as well, in Poland, Romania, where there's a lot of, well, it's a big seafood industry. In Europe, they have a high tolerance for listeria. If there's listeria, no big deal. It's not a problem. But when they want to export to the US, once again, zero tolerance for listeria. And what we've seen is like it's totally different mentality there. It's like when we started to work with Eastern Europe, from the first meeting to the first sale, it was right there. Like they have an attitude of like, let's do business. We got no time to wait. For us, it's too much. It's too important to be able to export to the US, and we're ready to take whatever innovation takes to do so. So it's funny to see like these different mentalities and realities, and let's say a slow approach versus a fast approach for innovation.
And the EU I'm surprised they have such a low tolerance because they tend to be, extremely strict. If you look at their GMP rules, they're
It's
quite strict. But I guess
yeah.
it's only when you're importing to them, not necessarily when they're producing domestically, is what you're saying.
Well, it's two different like acceptance of risk. I think in North America, we have a very low tolerance for the microbiological risk when we're regarding to Listeria salmonella, but we have a high tolerance for the chemical contamination, and that's why we're still allowed to use chlorine solution, acetic acid, where in Europe they're not allowed at all to use these type of chemicals, or let's say disinfectant for the food product. So they have no tolerance for chemical contamination, but a high tolerance for microbiological contamination. And when we were talking to our European counterpart, they were making fun of us of saying, well, you need a little bit of listeria to get your body up and running in the morning, and to get your immune system. So it was just funny to see like this two different mentalities.
We're both
For
smiling, but it's very serious actually.
yeah.
People could die from that. So yeah, surprising. When you're dealing with that market, I understand that your product is 100% natural. Is that true? And does that sort of make it easier for you to enter new markets?
Well, it's definitely a must for us because the first, let's say, added value for us is bringing naturality and effectiveness, and that's the winning duo for us. Most of our customers are in the organic section, and why? Because for them, using harsh chemicals or preservative, it's not feasible. Because if they want to have this organic certification, they're not able to use, let's say, traditional preservative because it wouldn't be so. But at the same time, going organic and getting rid of these preservative, you're putting yourself more at risk for this type of contamination because you don't have any more barriers for those pathogens. So for us, being able to bring both value, naturality, and effectiveness, that's where we're able to really bring value to the whole organic food processing industry.
So you can certify your product you can use your product in organic certified food products with no issue. That's a
Exactly.
big advantage. Wow.
Definitely. Well, for us, it was a must because otherwise, we won't have any, let's say, main advantage. We're still going to compete against, let's say, traditional preservative, and that's not what we're doing to do. We really want to bring something else and something new.
When I first got involved in the food industry, I was surprised to learn about the organic rules. And a couple of interesting things were that, first of all, there are certain toxins that are organic. So, arsenic and cyanide are both perfectly acceptable organic substances, really, but
Yeah.
that's all about it.
It's always a question of like my associate is from the pharma industry, and he says, well, everything is chemical, everything is chemically based. So the definition of when we say like, oh, it's a chemical, yes, but everything is from chemical based. So it's always there's a little of definitely marketing towards it, and the line to draw between organic and chemical, it's hard because, well, it's definitely bias line that is put there.
Yeah. Just to let all our organic customers off the hook because I don't want them to be all mad at me afterwards. I'll point out that the conclusion at the end of the day is that you actually can come out with safe, reliable products with organic methods. You just need to apply the best practices in order to really make sure that your products do meet the standard. It
Right.
is possible. So, but it's nice to hear that your product can do that. So if I wanted to treat for example, that 1,000 kilos you were talking to me before, what's the magnitude of cost that I'm looking at? You don't have to disclose all your detailed pricing to me, just as a general concept. Is it going to double the cost of my product, or is it?
I hope not, but typically it would be like your cost of use would be around 5 cents to 15 cents per kilogram of finished good. So typically for most food processor, we're less than 1% of their final selling cost. So we try to be very competitive compared to, let's say, still traditional preservative or against let's say our main competitor is in all the phages, and we know that phage, let's say, treatment against pathogen, that's very expensive as well. We also compare to say the cost of using high pressure system, where that's very expensive, and the logistic of it is really hard to go around. So definitely, we try to bring something that is easy to, you don't have to increase or double your price at all. So yeah, always target the less than 1%. So it's something that's easy to implement. And at the end, in terms of, let's say, using it, it's going to be really easy in terms of application, because you can add it either in the mass if you're making, let's say, a pesto, a smoothie, all that, let's say, liquid or semi-liquid, you just can add it within the mixture as it was, like it was a spice. Or when you're making, let's say, a meat product, seafood product, where there's a defined surface, then we would spray on it. So you just need to add a spray system, ideally right before packaging. So when we do the application, we're always thinking about trying to be the very last step possible before packaging, because in 95% of the case of a recall or contamination, the contamination came from the work environment, the operator handling the product, the slicing step, the cutting step. So when we are the last step before packaging, we treat all the risks that came before. And then once it's packaged, there's no risk of recontamination. It's protected by the packaging.
Well, that's really fascinating. So you and I are both entrepreneurs. I've known a lot of entrepreneurs in my life. The graveyard is full of entrepreneurial projects. Yours is successful. So what is the secret to your success?
It's a great question. I always find myself lucky to each years go past, and I was like, okay, that was a hard year. It's always hard, and there's always challenge. I think one of the things that made our success was to get an ecosystem of players who could help us from day one. From day one, I was coming out of my studies with a master's degree in food microbiology, and I just realized, okay, yeah, what I have is a needle of competence. Like, I don't know anything about marketing. I don't know anything about finance. I don't know anything about HR. There's so many pieces to put together in that puzzle of being an entrepreneur and being able to bring a successful business. So it was from day one to get the help from incubators, accelerators who are there to challenge you, to help you, to make sure that you're hitting all the target, and that each time you meet them, they break down your whole business model, and then you have to build it up again to make sure that we're taking the right decision, we're taking the right moves. And it's always a question of questioning yourself and being in self-doubt. So it's having all this ecosystem, and it's your counseling people around you to be able to challenge you, and being able to receive this challenge and be able to accept critics as well, because I don't want to assume anything, and I don't want to assume that my plan is great. I want to make sure that it is great. So definitely being able to have this ecosystem to really push you forward, and not working all by yourself alone and trying to do your best. No, you need all those people to make it work.
Do you have a co-founder, or are you the captain of the ship solo?
No, and that would be one of my recommendations. Don't do that solo. It's always easier to have a co-captain, I want to say, but at least a co-pilot with you. I have an associate. His name is François Bedard. He's the CTO of Innodal. So he's the real brain, the real nerd behind it all. He's the one who makes it all happen. I'm the one doing the pitches and doing the sales here. But honestly, it was a perfect marriage when we met together, because he was more than happy to do all the lab and being in a lab and doing all the science development thing. And if there's one thing he doesn't like to do, it's to go out there and do a pitch, because he's the introvert, and I'm the one who's more than happy not to go back in the lab and do those sales pitch. So honestly, it's been a perfect partnership until now. It's still going on. So no. One of my advice would be, don't do that alone. It's a lot easier when you're at least two to be able to support yourself. Otherwise, it's a lonely trip.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. When I started, I was completely alone. And yeah, I have a great team that's been with me for a long time. So that really
Yeah.
did help.
Well,
But,
that's one thing, that if you're alone, I think one of the things that you need to do fast is to build that, let's say, direction committee of people that you trust, that want to also to get involved, not necessarily as, let's say, partners in the business, but at least as leaders that want to see this business develop, and that they want to take accountability for the growth of the company. So yeah, definitely you need to get this entourage around you.
Yeah, I'm definitely blessed in that regard as well. So currently you have a Listeria product out, and then you're coming out with E. coli and Salmonella. Are those out already?
No, they're coming up. So our main challenge was definitely the regulation. Get Health Canada, get FDA. Was our, let's say, not barrier, but definitely milestone that we had to go through. Otherwise, if we weren't able to get INEO FDA approval, well, we wouldn't be able to bring any solution forward. So our first focus was really, okay, if we're able to get Health Canada, if we're able to get FDA, the rest of the portfolio will go through the same pathway. It's going to be like we'll know the path to take, and it's going to be a lot easier. So that's why like the next technology is going to go through the same pathway, and we say that Icicle is coming up and Salmonella as well, and because that was our main challenge. And it's a big challenge because you're building your whole company. You try to be in control of everything, but the moment that you submit your file to the FDA or Health Canada, it's 1 year of no news, and you lose control of your destiny because they're the one developing your file, and you're just hoping for the best and making sure that will I get approval? Otherwise, boy, it's gonna be a rough road if I don't get approval. So for us, it was making sure that are we able to check those marks, and definitely when we received FDA approval last month, wow, that was a lot of relief. And now we can say that we become, as any other companies, well, our challenge now is going to be marketing, sell, get the message out there, and we won't have this, let's say, the barrier of regulation that can be a deal breaker for a lot of companies.
It's the wheels of bureaucracy certainly turn slowly. We applied for some copyright protection and managed to get it after only a year and a half from the U.S., but it's been over 3 years, and we haven't heard back from an office here in Canada yet. So it'd be interesting to see how long that's actually going to take.
Yeah,
But anyway,
we
now
don't,
that
we oh, go ahead, sorry.
oh, you've conquered the peaks of the regulatory authorities in Canada and now the U.S. and you're working on the EU. What's next for you? What future are we going to see from you?
Being approved with Health Canada, with FDA, right now, like we have to, let's say, I won't say conquer, but definitely access and get it out there. We're so happy to see the response as well from the US. We were in food safety news a week ago. The day after publication in Food Safety News, our website crashed from the number of visits on the website. So definitely right now I'm just excited because wow, okay, the response is incredible from the US market as well. So for us, I think we have to do our marks in the US, get out there. We have definitely plenty to do there. And the goal is definitely to, well, be worldwide because that's the market, that's the opportunity that we have in front of us with something unique, patented. We know that we have a head start and we just need to seize that opportunity. So that's the next challenge is going to be really to scale up, to be able to do a responsible scaling up as well and not, well, just crash and burn, trying to scale up. So that's going to be the next challenge. And exciting to see that the challenge evolves throughout the journey.
Oh, that's amazing. That amount of traffic on your website is really impressive. Now that I know I have a food safety rock star on my show, I'm going to have to we shore up YouTube before we launch it, right?
Yeah, please watch out, Scaling. It's a small word. Food safety is a small word, but yeah, the traffic is intense.
On a side note, it's interesting that you come from Quebec because we're moving across into Quebec, actually, the Quebec markets. We've already signed with a major retailer who already uses our product throughout English Canada, and now they want to use it in Quebec as well. So for the last at least 6 months, we've been just pedal to the metal, localizing our application into French.
And, I can imagine translated in French. And
personally, for me, that's really difficult because I grew up in the States, so I never had the opportunity to learn any French. So I'm working with all kinds of French language interfaces that I don't understand a word of it, to be quite honest with you. Very embarrassing.
Well, je te souhaite bonne chance dans la traduction. So good luck in all that translation.
It's almost done. We're right at the very end, so it's good. Yeah.
Perfect. I'll double check everything if you want.
Excellent. There's 450 interfaces. I hope you don't.
That's going to be my little reading before going to sleep.
Excellent. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Oh, actually, one thing you need to add for sure is because some of our listeners listen only via audio. So in terms of how to get a hold of you or how to purchase your product or both? Where would they go, and what's your website? Maybe spell it out.
Definitely. So our website is www.innodal.com, INNODAL.com. You can reach out through our website. We have different partners also in this distribution, so plenty of access to the product, but definitely the first way to get a hold of us and the product Neo throughout our website, so www.innodal.com.
Okay, and we'll put the links down below in the YouTube version as well. So, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I think one thing that's for all the food safety people out there, I think just want to share passion with food safety. It's something that most industries more than often considered as, well, production first, food safety second. No, I think definitely food safety first. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any production, there wouldn't be any product. So it's we're more than proud to bring something new as well to food safety, a new tool. And we always make a joke to say that, it's a sleeping aid for food safety officer to make sure that they sleep well at night, knowing that they have another production, another barrier in the process against pathogenic strain like Listeria. So happy to bring innovation in a world, in a sector where innovations come pretty rarely, and be able to bring something new. So yeah, can't wait to hear back from all your auditor and be able to brainstorm with them and just get it out there and see what's feasible with that.
Well, it's a really exciting product you brought to market, and on behalf of the entire food industry, thank you for doing that. That's really good.
It's just fun. It's just passion and fun going the food industry and be able to innovate, because, well, clearly there's still space for innovation and really bringing something new and transform the industry.
All right. Okay, take care. It's been great talking to you.
All right. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Have a good day.
Thanks for tuning in to the FoodTech Innovators Podcast. We hope that you found today's discussion informative and inspiring. If you have any specific topics or questions you'd like us to cover in future episodes, feel free to reach out through social media or email info@icicletechnologies.com. Thanks again, and see you at the next episode of the FoodTech Innovators Podcast.